Okay, so we're going to make a quick video on risk management. And the biggest thing I can tell you about risk management is not risk minimization. People take risks all the time. People take risks, firms take risks. There's lots of things. I'll give you an example from bond response. Seems like that's where many of my examples come from. Risk management is when you are working on a roof, you have harnesses, you put down a 2x4 so you don't slide off, etc. Risk, there's still risk, but you've controlled it, you've managed it, you understand it. It's not just getting up on the roof, having no controls, having people drinking, etc. It's people having some controls in the risk that you're taking. Both firms and investors have risks. We will look at investors in the next video, but in this video, we're just going to focus on firms. And firms take risks and firms face risks. Some of the risks are firm specific. So if you're thinking firm specific risks, we can think of such things as fires or floods or theft, etc. So firm specific risk. And we can insure against that. We can buy insurance policies against many firm specific things. What we generally do for more macro risk or for economy-wide risk, let's call them macro risks, what we're going to do is we are going to hedge. And much of what we talk about in this video is looking at hedging. All right, so to understand what we're talking about, let's do an example. Let's look at a bakery, and this is a bakery, and if we look at, here we have the value of the bakery, here, value on this axis, and we'll have the price of wheat here. And if you think about it, wheat is an input for their pricing, so as wheat goes up, their costs are going to go up, and they're not going to have as much profit. So holding other things equal, what we're going to get is something that looks like this. So, and that goes through the axis. I just didn't draw it very well. So as the price of wheat goes up, the bakery drops in value. That is a risk. Now, I don't want the baker going to sleep worrying about the price of wheat because he or she doesn't control the price of wheat. We want to worry about what we can control. Now let's consider this same situation for the farmer. Here we have the value of the farm up here. And on this axis, we'll have the price of wheat. So presuming it is a wheat farmer, what we would get is something like this. As the price of wheat goes up, the value of the farm goes up. And as the price of wheat goes down, the value of the farm goes down. So we're left with something that looks like this, which, if you remember, is the exact opposite of what it looked like for the baker. So both the farmer and the baker have risks, and I'm just going to put them here again. So here we have the baker, and let me see if I flip a different color. Here we have the farmer. So if you put the two together, they've sort of immunized themselves. So one way of hedging is to do that, is to put themselves together. That is called an operational hedge. An operational hedge is when you actually change the way you do business. You change, you do a takeover, if you are the baker, you start to grow wheat. If you are the farmer, you open a bakery on the side. Now, there's a big problem with operational hedges. The transaction costs are high, and you are getting into something you don't know about. A baker doesn't know how to farm, a farmer doesn't know how to bake. So there is a big problem with operational hedges. But people do them all the time, and sometimes in very good reasons. These are particularly popular in developing nations where they don't have financial markets to offset the risk. The second type of hedge is what's called a financial hedge. And a financial hedge, what that does is to buy a financial instrument, usually a derivative, that goes in the direction opposite your core value, your core business. Okay, so it's a good time to remind ourselves what are financial securities, what financial derivatives we might be able to use to hedge. So if you remember, a long forward or a long futures position looks like this. So this is a long forward or future. A short forward or future looks like this. Okay, now you can also hedge with options. So remember the payoff diagrams for long call, short call, long put, short put? They looked like this. So here was a long call, and here was a short call. Remember the two combined to have a straight line, and here we have a long put, and here we have a short put. Those are payoffs for the derivative positions that we are going to use to hedge. Okay, so just to remind where we were, we had a bakery, and it looks something like this, where the payoff diagram went through the origin, which is where the price is. The price doesn't change at all. If the price goes up, the price of wheat goes up, the value of the bakery drops. If the price of wheat goes down, the value goes up. So that should be a straight line, and it's not a very good line, but you get the idea. Let me erase it real fast and just redraw it. So we have something that looks like that. All right, now how do we hedge it? Well, we hedge it by buying a financial security that moves in the opposite direction. So one way would be to buy a long futures contract. So a long futures contract would look like this. So as the price of wheat goes up, the core business would be dropping in value. So here's the core business. But the hedge, the financial hedge, would go up in value. So if theoretically, if they're done correctly, and if it's sort of impossible, but what you would do is you add the two together and you would have immunized yourself. The value of the firm would now be immunized, would be independent of the price of wheat. If the price goes up, the price goes down, you don't care. What you care about would be how to manage the firm, how to make better bread, how to make better cookies, etc. You would not worry about the price of wheat anymore. And that's exactly why we want to do this. Okay, so now we're going to look at the value of the farm. And for some reason it was in thicker print, but you get the idea. Here we have the price of wheat over here, and we have the value of the farm. So what happens is the price of wheat goes up, the value of the farm goes up. So we have a line that looks like this. Now, what do we do to hedge this position? Because we don't want to go out of business. Somewhere, all firms have this game over point, this out of business point, whatever you want to call it, that if the price of wheat drops down here, the company will go out of business. The farmer will shut down. So we don't want that to happen. So what we do is we want to buy a financial derivative that goes in the opposite direction, one that looks like this. Okay? Now, what type of derivative is that? Well, that is a short futures contract. So what we would do is we would sell wheat in advance, lock in the price, and then we don't care. And again, if we produce the exact number of units that is in a contract, so 5,000 bushels or some multiple of 5,000 bushels, we are immunized against it. An overall position would look like that. It is very, very, very rare that that happens, that you add the two together and you've totally immunized yourself against risk. But that's what we want to do. More likely what happens is you reduce the risk. So you instead of having something so steep, and I'll show you on the next slide, we will have something that is a little less steep. Okay, so let's jump back to the bakery now. So here we have the core business, and before we saw what would happen if we hedged it with a futures contract, and here would be the futures contract. But we don't want to have this loss down here. This is still a loss. So one thing we might want to do is, instead of a futures contract, we might want to do it with a long call position. So here, at this point, over on the right, where the price of wheat goes up, we're making money on the on the hedge. This is the call contract, and that's offsetting. This part is offsetting the loss that we have from the price in the core business because the price of wheat rose. On the left side, as the price of wheat drops, we get to, quote, participate in the upside. We get this gain, and it's offset by no loss because there's nothing here. So the combined position would look something like this. So over here, we're left with this part, and then we're adding positive and negative, so we're left with this part. So we're no longer, if the price of wheat goes up, doesn't matter. If the price of wheat goes down, yay, we win. So that is how we would want to use a call contract, a long call position, to hedge our risk. And now we'll do the same with the value of the farm. Remember, the value of the farm increases as the price of wheat goes up. So there we go. This is our core business. Core business. And to hedge it, we showed earlier what would happen if you used a forward or a futures contract. And again, that's supposed to go through the origin. And here we have gains offset on both sides. We make money here because the price of wheat goes up, but we lose money on the hedge. Over here, we lose money because the price of wheat is down, so we sell wheat, it doesn't make as much money, but we made money on the hedge. So again, that would immunize ourselves. We aren't concerned about the price of wheat. However, we still don't like losing money. So if the price of wheat goes up, we would like to be able to sell it at a higher price. So what we might want to do is to buy a put contract. A put gives you the right but not the obligation to sell at a certain price. So what that would look like is something like this. So here we have this line, and then we would walk away from it over here. So then, just like before we saw in the bakery example, if the price of wheat drops, we would be able to sell it at a higher price. Try that again. If the price of wheat drops, we have a locked in. We've sold it at the price in the strike contract, so we've made money here, and it offset the loss that we had here. So that's good. So we've immunized ourselves there. And over here, what happens if the price of wheat goes up? We sell it in the open market. We let the contract expire worthless, so we get to make this, and then this would be zero. So the combined position, I guess we'll go like this, would be something that looks like that. So the price of wheat goes up, and we make money, and the price of wheat goes down, and we don't lose any. So we're no longer concerned about the price of wheat so much. It's minimized or reduced our downside. Okay, so that is an example of financial hedging. Very, very useful. Now, there are some problems, and we'll see those in the next slide. Okay, so one thing that people tend to get in trouble for is the difference between speculating and hedging. So speculating is when, when we have our core business going like this. Here's our core, whatever it is, and we add a financial position that goes in that same direction. So then what happens is that this slope gets steeper. So we end up with, let me draw it like this, we end up with something that looks like, and I'll put it in red, something that looks like this. Very, very, very steep. So for a small change in whatever it is, the price of wheat, the price of oil, the price of whatever, for a small change, we get a very big value change in both directions. That is risky because, again, we still have this game over point. And now we get to that game over point much quicker than we would over here, where the game over point, the price of whatever, oil, wheat, whatever we're looking at, has to drop a lot before we get to the game over point. In this case scenario, when we're speculating, when we're taking a hedge, and I'm going to use the term loosely, I'll put it in quotes because it's just a financial position, on the same side of our core business, we make it much steeper. So we put the two together, and the slope gets steep, and then therefore it's riskier. Financial hedging done correctly is when we have a core like this, just like we saw before, and we put in a financial position, a financial derivative position that goes in the opposite direction. So you put the two together, and we have a flatter slope. So instead of something that was like this, let me just get to draw it again, instead of something like that, we get something that is flatter, and it looks like this. So that means instead of going this far for the price change to put us out of business, it would have to go way down here, and the likelihood of that happening is much lower. So key point, speculating is taking a position that goes in the same direction as your core, and hedging is taking a position, that's really sloppy, but hedging is taking a position that moves in the opposite direction of your core business. Now, I want to stress that very few people actually immunize themselves. Immunization here is not the goal. Immunization is when there is no risk. That is generally too expensive. So immunization, not the goal. But what is the goal is risk control or risk management. Risk management, what we're doing is we're reducing risk, but not eliminating it. We still have some risk, but we've flattened out the slope of the curve, and it's a lot less risky. Now, even when we do everything correctly, it doesn't always work. For instance, a contract for wheat is 5,000 bushels. What if we produce 6,000 bushels? Well, we're still not completely hedged. Even if we try, we think everything is right. On the other hand, what if we produce wheat that is better quality or lesser quality? Again, we're not completely hedged. What if our hedge, what if we actually, let's say, we're exposed to the price of corn, and we're a bakery that makes cornbread, and we've hedged it with wheat. Well, wheat and corn move together quite regularly, but sometimes they move apart. So therefore, they wouldn't be a perfect hedge. I think the key idea here is that hedging is reducing risk, not eliminating risk. Okay? And the next one we'll look at is why this is important for investors. This was looking at firms. Next, we'll look at investors.